Welcome to the Learn Tourism Digital Drop-In webinar. Most of you know my name is Sarah Benoit, and I'm so glad to see everyone again this month, especially as we head into the summertime season, which I am very excited about. I feel like we had a long winter here in Western North Carolina, so I have been grateful to see the mountains turning green and really enjoying this shift into just that sort of lighthearted, fun part of the year that we all get to enjoy. As we go through today, if you've never been to a digital drop-in, there's a couple things I want you to know. One, I will be like the Wizard of Oz in the background today. I'll be watching the chat. I'll be watching the Q&A. So please feel free to drop questions into either of those places, and I'll make sure that we pass those along and that they get answered today. Also, I always provide the recording of this webinar 2 days after we do it. So on Friday, you will get a copy of the recording. You'll be able to go back over whatever we talked about. You'll also be able to share it with anybody that you think could really use the information. But the most exciting part of my webinar this month is that I get to introduce someone that I have really grown to just appreciate, someone who's taught me a lot, especially when it comes to the tourism and travel industry, and that is Chris Kavanaugh. So Chris and I have worked together a lot over the years on a number of different projects, and he is one of the founders of our DIY tourism conference, which we've been doing for almost 9 years now. But thank you so much, Chris, for joining us today to host the webinar, and Michelle and Rob, I'm really excited to have you both here to share your experiences. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you, Sarah. I greatly appreciate it. I'm excited about this because there is really no book when it comes to doing budgeting. Yes, there probably are books that have been written, but there is no one definitive authority as to how to go about doing budgeting. And I have with me a couple of folks that I've known for a very long time in the destination marketing sector. Michelle Owens from Henderson County in North Carolina, and Rob Wells, who is a North Carolina native, but is in the Beaufort, South Carolina area. And I'm going to let I know that you've seen their bios and they are available online on the registration page, but I'm going to let each one of them talk just briefly about their own destination, their particular situation. I just want to say, though, that these two folks are some of my favorite people in this industry. They are both very hard workers, very creative. And we've selected two destinations to talk about this topic today, or two representatives from two destinations to talk about this topic today that are 270 miles apart, have some common characteristics, but in many ways are very different in terms of how they are funded and how they go about doing their annual budgeting process. And of course, this time of year, for most destination marketing organizations around the country that are on a July 1 to June 30th fiscal year, this is typically a very busy time of year when it comes to the budget process. So I'm going to let them introduce their destinations and their how they're funded, their destination marketing organizations, here in a second. I'll start with Michelle, and I'm going to share just briefly my slide or my screen. And hopefully everyone can see that. Go ahead, Michelle, tell us about the Henderson County Tourism Development Authority in the great state of North Carolina.
All right. Thank you, Chris. Glad to be here. So I see from location, some of you folks are very familiar with Henderson County, North Carolina. We like to say that Hendersonville is the brand, Henderson County is the destination, but our official title is the Tourism Development Authority of Henderson County. So simply, like all other TDAs that exist in the state of North Carolina, we are a creature by piece of legislation out of Raleigh. We're all very similar, but all have a little bit of differences. Here in Henderson County, there's a 5% occupancy tax collected, and that is our sole source of funding. That piece of legislation also directs how we are to spend that funding, create our board, etc. So at least 2/3 of the occupancy taxes collected here in Henderson County are to be spent on marketing, and up to 1/3 can be spent on tourism-related capital expenditures. So that's our funding mechanism here in Henderson County. And it's a pretty important industry to our county. And you can see, according to most recent economic impact study, $500 million was spent here It's, I believe, the third largest employer in the state, in the county, excuse me, of any industry. Last year, we accounted for 22% of all sales tax collected were spent by visitors here in this county. That was a little bit down from the year previous, mostly due to a little thing called Hurricane Helene. The year previous, that 22% was instead 26%, which is about a little more normal, but gives you an idea of where we are and who we are. And our budget is usually, occupancy taxes have varied. One of those destinations that kind of shot up after COVID because of all the outdoor amenities. On average, we bring in about 3.7 million in occupancy taxes every year. So that's our funding mechanism.
Great. Thank you. If you haven't ever visited Henderson County, it's a wonderful destination, a really nice blend of both outdoor recreation and natural assets, along with a lot of small town charm. So, Rob, I'm going to switch over to you, a very different destination in the low country of South Carolina. And you're going to tell us about your particular community, Beaufort and Port Royal in the Sea Islands of South Carolina, which, again, as I said, 270 miles apart and probably about a difference of about 2,500 feet in elevation as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And where we're standing at right now is at about 20 feet elevation. Anyway, thanks for having me on here. Love to be a participant anytime I get to be in the same space as Chris, as well as Michelle. It's a good time. For the record, I do vacation in Henderson County, Flat Rock. The Carl Sandburg home is a tremendous trails. And there's your plug, Michelle.
Thank
My
you,
family
Rob.
loves the trails there. It's a great place to visit. Funding in South Carolina for us is tied to what other people might call occupancy tax. We call it accommodations tax, but it's the same. We do carry two different types of it, but it's all in the total equals 5% in collection. So South Carolina collects the 2%, what we call the state accommodations tax. And local governments, both the town, the city, and the county, collect a 3% accommodations fee. And so there's the variation that we have to say someone like a TDA in North Carolina, where they collect 100% of the total 5%. We are remitted only 30% of 2%. So if you look at the map, it's a weird budget. And so for a CVB of ours, just like us, our agreements have to be set up with each individual local governing body to be a recipient of the state 2%. And we also have to apply for those grants that they may offer. And so for each year, our budget varies not only how much we increase in the state accommodations tax that was collected, but also how well we do in the grant cycle. And so from one year to another, we are tied to, and I put it on the screen there, where 45% of our budget is based on year-over-year collections, and 50% of our budget is based on grants from those local governing bodies. Just to put it in perspective, Beaufort is located between Charleston and Savannah. We share the same county with Hilton Head Island, which is one of the premier islands in the country. And tourism in our area is about a $1.3 billion economic impact. And total economic spend or total spend in northern Beaufort County, which is our domain, is fairly high and equal to that of what you saw from Michelle. But we also split a lot of those funds with our other DMO partner in the county. And so therefore we don't collect the full 30%. So that's a variation in our budget. We do make do with how we operate. I think there's some conversation to be made on the budget, but again, we have to be creative in our budget process each and every year to roll out strategy and our plan. And I look forward to sharing that with you guys today.
Thanks, Michelle and Rob. Greatly appreciate it. So I'm going to ask just a pretty basic question that probably has 1,001 different answers, and it's probably one of the most common questions I receive when it comes to the budgeting process every year is, where do you start? For the two of you, where do you begin the process in putting together an annual budget? How do you engage your teams, your marketing partners, and your board in this process as well? And I'll start with you, Rob. Tell us a little bit about where you begin every year.
So we start typically when the local governing bodies start putting together their prelim budgets to go to councils, their individual councils. And so we get a good idea of what they're going to put in the budget for the collection. Now we work with the finance teams in each one of those to prepare them with the data that we're seeing and tracking, and work with the state on the collection amount. And then from there, we have to build out our percentages. And so for us, it's taking that 2% collection at the state level, monitoring that throughout the year, showing the ups and downs of where we project it to be. They will make a they'll put it in the budget, and then we will start to do our math equations from there. And what it does is it allows for us to be a part of the process with the local city administration finance team or the county finance team, and we really hone in on what that number is going to be. So that process starts usually in February for us.
How do you engage with your board in that process? Obviously, their permission is required in terms of final approval, but do you either engage with the board or with your stakeholders in this process as well, just to get the lay of the land and take their temperature?
Yes, indeed. For example, next week, we'll have final approval of our budget, which comes after the third reading of the city budget, third reading of the county budget. And so once those budgets are approved at their level, then we can definitively say, hey, this is the number that's in the mark. And so that's why we have to push ours to the very end of the fiscal year. But it's something, a process that we began, I would say in March. I work with our finance committee and start laying out the plans, and we say, okay, what strategic initiatives do we need to put in place? What part of the new strategic plan that we are going to implement, where we're going to fund? And then we build our budget around that based on those prelim numbers.
Michelle, where do you start the process and how do you engage with your partners, your stakeholders, and your board?
In some ways, the process is never ending, because the first and ongoing thing we do among staff and internally is constantly looking at research, data that we're getting, et cetera, since ours is directly tied to the ongoing occupancy tax, just monitoring where that is, what it's influencing, what's the predictive model, how are we doing this year, what are we looking at next year, that sort of thing. So that's ongoing. And of course, I keep the board apprised of that. But what I like to do when it gets to real budget season is pull the board together. We, in the spring, usually have a session to plan. And I intentionally, and I tell them this, don't talk about numbers to begin with, but rather we try to focus on strategic priorities and deciding what those are. And they know I know the numbers and I've shared data with them. I don't keep them in the dark, but I really try to keep them and partners first thinking about what's our mission and what's most important for us to do this next year, and hear them, because how you spend your dollars then will tie into what your priorities are. So if you first identify those priorities, at least this is what I do, identify those priorities, get everyone hopefully on the same table with those, what those priorities are. And then in the meeting after that, I will present a budget. And when I do, I try my best to show them how I'm recommending we allocate these dollars are tied to the strategic priorities that have been identified and agreed upon.
You mentioned earlier the impact of Hurricane Helene in
Yeah.
2024 upon both your community and your organization. It's something that was shared by a lot of your peers in Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia and Tennessee. How did it impact your budget, and what changes were you forced to make, and how hard was that?
Well, it's hard on every level for everyone involved. Anyone who's lived through a hurricane understands that. And I had been on the coast, and so this was something different and special, if you want to call it that. But so as soon as we had internet, one of the first things I started doing was trying to reach out to anyone that had suffered, any destination that had suffered historical damage, whether it was New Orleans or fires, Hawaii, trying to look at what can we expect, and did a lot of predictive models and felt really confident that the best guess we could come up with based on all of our factors is that we would be down by 30% this current fiscal year. So we made cost adjustments. We dialed back our budget. We dialed back our expenses. We dialed back a lot. The silver lining to us that I think is very clarifying for both myself and the board is in understanding what is essential for us to do and what were we not going to cut. And we were not going to cut marketing or touch that, and sometimes you can get so busy doing so many things that this gave us the opportunity to just really hone in on what mattered most. And I think that's going to be a long-term benefit for us of that. What we didn't expect was that we are going to end up actually being just a little bit over where we thought we would be instead of being down 30%. And that is due to all the worker traffic that has come and stayed in this destination. That's the one bit of, if any of you go through a natural disaster, and I hope you don't, That's one factor. The only factor maybe that I hadn't considered, both displaced homeowners and worker traffic. And we got that, started getting that real data, but we were just driving around to hotels and checking in with people. We started seeing all the dump trucks and the electric trucks and all the things. And actually, we ended up for several months up from the previous year by 20 and 30%. I call it the reverse Uno card year. And I think that's part of the name of the game with this is just you're so closely tied to one industry. You just have to be flexible at all times and a little sleepless.
A lot sleepless. I think you're
Mm.
underplaying that. Rob, Michelle is somewhat more independent. She has a dedicated source of funding. As you mentioned, you have to go beg for your supper, so to speak, for your budget. You obviously have to work very closely with your elected leaders and government managers to receive their support for your funding. Tell us a little bit about that process. And is it the same every year, or does it change depending on who's in office, what the other major community needs are, what your needs might be, and where does that process begin?
Yeah, so it's the same in a lot of ways because of the way that the state statute is written for state accommodations tax. That there's a dedicated amount of money that has to be put towards a destination marketing or management organization such as ours. So that's helpful. That's something we can kind of predict and look around. It's the grant process that becomes the part that we have to the singing for our supper side where we have to collaborate. We have to present an effective plan and be able to show why we're asking for an increase in one particular year or another when they might need some other needs. Well, that goes to the heart of that trust buildup that we have with our local officials. So I would say that as it stands today, it hasn't always been the case, but as it stands today, the Convention and Visitors Bureau here in Northern Beaufort County have a really good relationship built on trust and transparency with our local officials. So we share data openly and often with those folks. City administration, can text me and we'll get back to them real quickly with whatever data they may be looking on, partnering for local events, being very collaborative at the drop of a hat. And I think those things are what they're looking for because while they have a stake in the game, they understand the investment level. I put it on our slide that we share the return on investment quite a bit. It's an effective piece that we have to show because, to be honest with you, say City of Beaufort, they're very dependent on the tourism accommodations tax, the local level, but also local hospitality tax. Tourism in general is spending in our local economy to be a big part of it. And so they know that having a very efficient and effective and, one that is very strategically driven PDV benefits them. And that's what we're trying to live up to. Now, it also helps that we have built in for how the funds are distributed so that we're not in a cash flow position, a negative cash flow position. And that's been truly helpful. And that's something that gives us some criteria we need to follow and something that they deliver on as far as releasing funds in a timely manner so that we can carry out the business.
You and your peers in recent years, I know in many places have had to deal with a lot of elected leader turnover. Is that something that you've had to face in your municipalities and in the county? And does that just begin that re-education process all over again?
Yes. So so in the last 3 years, we've had 3 county administrators,
Wow.
2 county chairs. We're on our second mayor in 3 years. One was up in a special election, and then we've got, and so we have some new city administrators. So yes, it's an education process, but a lot of that is our opening. We realize that we have to sing for our budget each year. It pushes them out there to be a part of the conversation, so that we're not the dinner on the table.
For both of you, what's the most difficult thing that you have to deal with consistently in the budget process each year? What's the thing that causes you to lose sleep as you go through this process every year, independent of the Hurricane Helene's and major economic downturns and pandemics and so forth? But what do you consider to be the most difficult thing you've got to deal with?
Yeah, I would say two. One is just the ongoing making sure you're on making the kind of crystal ball reading, right? And trying to use every tool that you can to do that. I think it is for this destination particularly, but I think it's true for a lot of them, even though we have that dedicated funding, it's a plus and a minus. You know, the board does have to be real clear because a lot of people would spend that money or try to tell the board how to spend its money, and
Absolutely.
making sure that we're doing it for the reasons we were legally created to do that, and we're doing our job. I think that's the ongoing, and similar to Rob, we have a constant re-education process. Even though the TDA board is my boss, that TDA board has county commissioners, city, municipal people appointing them to the board. So all those political players are my boss's bosses, right? So those relationships matter as well. And if the commissioners aren't happy with what their appointees are doing on the TDA board, they could always change it, right? So I think that is the most difficult part is, it's not hard to educate the TDA board about what our mission is, what we're supposed to do, what our priorities are, but it's that ongoing, omnipresent educating those local leaders with, I would love to do this, but by law, we can't put in a sewer line. I'm sorry, I'd like to. That's actually illegal for us to do. Things like that are difficult.
Rob, what about you? What's the most consistently difficult thing that you encounter in the budget process?
In the budget process, good idea fairies. I know that they exist out there in every lunch. And so when you have great ideas that come about and it catches you off guard. And so it could be as simple as, well, we need to redo this park. So I think that's the best way I can say it. That's usually what gets us in trouble.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine one time refer to certain good idea fairies, which I'll remember that one, but he referred to something similar. He referred to it by an acronym called GMOOT, which is GMOOT, which is when your boss or board chair or city official comes into your office and says, "Get me one of those," GMOOT, and having to deal with that. So I'll add on to that. Both of you touched on this, but I think it's a key. It's becoming increasingly important for all of the leaders in the destination space, which is managing expectations when it comes to investments and expenditures that are and are not allowed, or are not part of your strategy or policy. And
Mhm.
Michelle, you touched on that. Rob, you just touched on it a little bit. How do you manage those expectations when it comes to people who think that you're simply the fun and games department, Rob?
Yeah, that's tough, especially since both the state accommodations tax and the local accommodations tax are split so many different ways and have a little bit different allowances, if you will. And so if the city of Beaufort, and I'm not big, they really do a fantastic job of knowing what the investment needs to be and doing a good job of it. But they have outside influences. So for example, affordable housing or workforce housing in our market, just like everybody else's market, is a topic of concern. So what happens? There's a pot of money in this local accommodations tax that they need to touch to help fund it because these people are working in the tourism industry. And so it becomes a little bit of a legislative thing. And so you get something out of Columbia that says that you can use up to 15% of the local accommodations fund towards workforce housing right there off the bat. Now you've got a new idea created. What does that mean for local? It doesn't mean that the tourism office or the CBB is against that item. It's just, what does that do for the disruption funding or other activities that we may need to invest in, such as an attraction that the city funds or keeps up, such as a waterfront park? Those questions are common because there's so many different avenues to touch into those in utilization. It could be as simple as flooding. The city of Charleston, with a little bit of increase of rain, it floods. And so now there's legislation in place that they can use state accommodations and local accommodations tax to mitigate flood. Guess what? If it's flooded in town, visitors can't get here, so it makes sense. So just a willingness to work. Our board has done a very good job of saying, okay, this is not something that we need to worry about. This is actually something we need to participate in. And it's one of those advisory roles that we can play within the community, like orchestrating and commenting. Those are type of things that interrupt a budget process, especially in capital project needs when they're putting out the capital projects plan as part of the budget and just paying attention.
Michelle, what about you? How do you manage the expectations around what you can and cannot do with your budget, and what aligns with your strategy and policies and what doesn't?
Again, the law is our best friend, and I don't care what group I'm in front of, who I'm talking to locally. They always get 2 or 3 slides. But one of the things that we all have our drums that we beat all the time in front of our local folks and partners that we're working with. And one of those I've been beating for a while, the hurricane actually helped us for folks to see it. And that is, you want the biggest thing we can do to help our economy and all of our businesses and locals is to market, right? That's not a distraction. That's why because don't kill the goose that lays the golden egg. If you're trying to cut so far into our budget with other great fairy ideas that we can't market properly, people coming into town, it's kind of the whole basic premise of all of our existence. People coming into town, spending dollars, pumps money into the economy. We don't have to raise them, care for it. They dump money in our economy and then they go home. And I've been saying that it was beginning to get some traction, but I got a call from a county commissioner a couple weeks after the storm going, how soon can people come in? Because our sales tax, they began to immediately see, oh, yes, we need that sales tax. Yes, that's the money we do bring you. It may not be a direct check from us, but that's why we exist. And I think that's something that's real important for us in getting that message across. It's buried underneath everything else, but our reason for existence is to serve our communities and in turn produce revenue for businesses and governments alike.
It's certainly become even more acute given the fact that so few small businesses in Western North Carolina, where you are, have received any kind of grants. Right. Many are still paying off loans from COVID. And so you become, by helping drive customer demand, you become a much needed shot in the arm in terms of right now, at least until there is funding available. But we're now 8 months past the hurricane, which means that funding may not appear until well after a year. What the best thing you can do, obviously, is drive customer demand. We'd all love to believe that once the budget is created, with the exception of natural disasters and other unexpected events like COVID, we'd love to believe that the budget is the budget. But how do you stay nimble with your plans? How do you take advantage of good things, new opportunities that may come along, or reallocate dollars to meet new challenges? As you think about developing your budget, how do you think about, how do I stay nimble enough to take advantage of both good opportunities and challenges? Michelle, I'll let you jump in first.
Okay. First is constantly monitoring, see what's coming in and seeing how we're tracking are we thinking we're going to bring in the revenue we thought we were, right? Because you have to be nimble in that way. But when new ideas come along, we do have a small fund balance, relatively speaking. And so I always try to keep some in what we call the unallocated bucket. If necessary, for a really important opportunity, we can vote as a board to bring that in for larger ticket things. Sometimes we do allocate that in the annual budget process. In fact, this year we are, for the first time, allocating a whole passel of it, about $500,000, to improve our marketing because of our current situation. I think our county finance director, I liked how she put it once. She was like, a budget, no matter how well approved, is nothing but a plan. And plans are always subject to change, right? And so you always try to build in just a little buffers here and there and be able to make line item transfers and commitments just here and there where you can change things as necessary. Even in your own marketing plan, if you're working with an agency, when are you making your buys? If something happens, where can you add to or take away from? You have them keep a contingency fund and don't commit every single dollar that you're planning on spending on marketing July 1. That's when our fiscal year begins. So little places where you can try to remain nimble, and then for larger things, try to keep some nominal fund balance. You don't want to hoard your money. You want to do with it what you're supposed to do, but keep some for those kinds of opportunities and needs as they arise.
Rob, how do you build in nimbility into your budget plan?
That's a great question. So since a lot of our budget is built off grants, in grant funding, our ability to bring in more than what we budgeted for on a grant is ideal. And so this happened recently. We were awarded a lot more money than we had budgeted for, and therefore it increases our marketing plan. And then the return on that has been very effective for us to tell our stories for maybe an increase or sustained number going forward. It being nimble, we do have a fund balance that we do operate under that we can pull from. Being upfront with our board, but also our stakeholders on why that's necessary is also important. But at the end of the day, our strategic plan has been our guiding force on how we budget and need to move forward. So while there may be something that we could be nimble for, maybe it's a piece of research that we need to look into, or maybe updating some brand or creative or something of that nature, or as simple as adding a new trade show to our sales team. We've planned for it, we've thought about it, we've built those pots out and been able to use them accordingly.
Just a couple of final questions. I want to make sure we leave a little bit of time for anyone amongst our participants in the audience. I wanted to bring up one other area that I started thinking about. Probably one of the areas that has caused the most consternation for you and your peers in recent years have been human resource cost, and that's retention, recruitment, and certainly benefits. I know that cost of benefits continues to be a challenge. How do you go about determining what your anticipated increases are in terms of human capital cost and associated benefits with that?
I'll jump in. For us as a TDA, we could absolutely be a standalone entity with all that. And some might say it can be a deal with the devil, but it's working for us. We actually have an MOU with our county government where we pay for the privilege to be county employees. What that buys us is a number of things. Among those are HR services, medical, health, all of that. And so those price structures are brought down by going through the local government systems in North Carolina. I've done the math a couple of ways, and it's always for us a whole lot less expensive with a whole lot better benefits to just stay with and add in that agreement as to be county, quote unquote, county employees. So I know if we were to go out on the open marketplace, that would be a whole different landscape. And Rob, I don't know where you are, that might be it, but that's what we do. So it doesn't vary too much. We're grateful for that in our area.
I remember those days when I was in North Carolina. I remember being a part of the TDA and then being a part of a county buy-in. That's what you needed to do for the benefits and the packages. That is not the case here. And for what we have to do, we need, as an organization, we have a role. And so we may have to forego certain things in order to invest in our HR capital. The board has done a very good job, and I think they could beat the drum for us a little bit on how to tell, this is the job that you are asking us to do. We are an organization that can deliver. We have a certain set of skill sets that make us very important to the local tourism economy and being able to draw people to the area. We have a successful track record. That's the story we tell. As far as retaining talent in a small area such as Beaufort, finding talent's one thing, retaining talent's a completely different thing. And so the investment that we've made on the HR side from a benefits package, complete flexibility. That doesn't mean everybody gets to work remote, but they can if they choose. And it's being flexible. I think there's almost to a fault, but we get the job done. And I think team enjoys that quite a bit. That is a flexible thing that, say, the county offices may not be able to alter, the city doesn't do it at a certain level. And our biggest competitor is the federal government, since we have the Department of Defense has 3 military installations in the area and they pay very well. So we're enclosing those ecosystem, if you will, just trying to be nimble, both with our budget, but also our HR calls. Health insurance this year is a killer. This one's a big one.
Yeah, I've been in several budget presentations this year. Your peers have made to boards, and there's always an audible gasp amongst some board members when you start rolling out 20% increases in health insurance. In some other cases, I've had clients who have been reevaluating their pay structure and trying to bring their staff up to market. And again, an audible gasp oftentimes when those numbers are presented.
Unfortunately, we still operate like a startup. So there's certain things that we have to make sure that we're putting in, but the health insurance costs, and I'm prayerful that next week when I present the budget, I don't have someone catch me off guard and say, that's too much.
Yeah.
I think we put in the legwork to find the number that makes sense this year. We were quoted at 23%. We've been quoted 18. I think we worked it down to 12. Crazy.
No.
Still, that's where we are. And I've had to and listen, it's not just to the board, it's also to the team. Like this budget process is a part of the team. So we operate like a owner operated, employee led organization. So they have buy-in. Look, this is the health benefit costs. I know a lot of us have certain parameters we need covered. We just have open conversations about what the situation looks like and make the best organizational choice.
You do make a good point, though, which is you don't wait until the final reading of the budget to discuss those numbers. Otherwise, the last thing you want is for your board or other authorities to be surprised at the last minute when you're dumping a 20% increase in health insurance on
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's usually the first thing I mentioned at the meeting prior to. It's this here's healthcare costs and put it out there. But healthcare can't be the number one cost expense going forward. It's got to be you got to find another one to latch on to.
Sarah, do we have any questions at this point? Otherwise, I'll throw another one or two in here as well.
Yeah, no, we don't have any questions. We've got a couple thank yous in the chat, so everybody
Huh?
really appreciates the conversation. But yeah, if you'd like to wrap up, actually, one just popped up. Thank you to that person. One question we have here is, how do you influence the local sentiment on tourism and handle outsider scrutiny of your budgets?
No, that's a good one, and something that almost everyone is having to deal with now, regardless of the size of the budget. Rob, I'll start with you, and Michelle, I know you've got some thoughts about this as well.
We try very hard to articulate what the data is telling us and being a data driven organization. That way, when we have a fallback position of someone maybe criticizing what's going on, whether it be local sentiment on tourism in general, like where you have too many tourists, we're better to answer the question for them. Or we could spend that marketing money. Beaufort markets itself. Everybody's here. And we point to some recent history where there was no marketing dollars and there was no visitors and the local economy struggled. But we have to have that on the ready and make sure that we're honest in our approach. But we do have, that is something that happens. And in our area, it's not just just outside the area looking at us. It's usually brand new friends and neighbors that have moved to the area. And hey, look, I like the way it used to look, or like when I bought here, I want it to look like that again. We have to have those conversations, which may be a different Zoom panel at some point.
Yeah, because you make a good point too. I'm sure there are people who tell you that, like you said, either, people already know Beaufort and the Low Country. We've got people doing our marketing for us here. But you also have somewhat of a built-in visitation with the Parris Island Marine Corps graduation,
Sure.
which attract a large number of visitors on a very regular basis. But there's still work to be done.
Absolutely.
Michelle, what about you? How do you manage those expectations?
The first thing, and we said resident sentiment about tourism, correct? One of the first things I did when I got here was I did some research, and I had to talk to the research company, explain, now I'm not looking about traveler sentiment. I want to know, what do the locals think about tourism, right? Do they love it? Do they hate it? Do they think there's too much? Do they feel over touristed, not enough, etc.? Just to understand, how do people here feel about tourism writ large and what it means to them? What do they understand about its value, or do they just hate it? And that really helped me a lot. The biggest thing I got from it was, by and large, locals here seem to believe it was necessary, although a lot of them said it was a necessary evil, right? So that helped me from the very beginning, and it was very important to this community as a crossroads community. We're situated between very rural areas to the east of us, and then Asheville just to the west of us. So it's, as Chris said, a mix of urban and rural, and people are wanting to grow but maintain who they've been. They want to keep both elements here. And so being cognizant of that has also helped me drive our marketing as well as local perception of who we are. So that's been a guiding star for me. I've been here 4 years, so that research was about 4 years ago. But that sentiment, the only thing I would say has changed about it since then is that people probably have more dropped the evil thanks to the hurricane, because when nobody was walking in the restaurants and no one was walking, even though Main Street was perfectly fine, everyone's suddenly, please bring back the tourists. Again, silver linings to otherwise very dark cloud. People have come to innately go, thank you, please bring tourists. Yes, we want you to come here. And I wouldn't advise this as a way for people to get buy-in on what you do, but it certainly has helped us.
Research is also helpful in that so often now it's the loudest voices that get heard.
Oh, yeah.
Or it's whatever gets posted to Facebook or other social media that helps determine the conversation in the community. And I see that in a lot of the two of you are not alone. I see this in so many places now. And of course, we're our biggest critics as residents. Constantly, I find it's the visitors that love us more than we love ourselves. So many places.
One follow up, Chris.
Yeah.
Just the one thing that I would, for anyone making a budget, if you're a nonprofit organization or a TDA or CDB or whatever the organization is that you're preparing your budget for, track your impact. Like, make sure you can articulate to a point what the impact that your organization is doing, necessity to it. And I think that's been the best part for us, is that we've had naysayers for years. And I think the industry and CDB and tourism in general always have that. And that's just make the case, track your impact, make sure you can articulate that number, make sure it's not your gut reaction only, make sure that you have a trackable impact so that you can put that to use. And so research is very important. Visitor sentiment's great, but local sentiment's probably better when you're singing for your supper, but state the case, a piece of impact that you provide for the community.
Michelle, any final words from you to wrap up here?
Just in all things, always try to keep the main thing. There'll always be idea fairies. There'll always be budget fluctuations, no matter how you're funded. But if you have a real clear idea in your mind about where you need to go, what you need to be doing, all those things will come and go. But if you keep just pushing towards that clear thing, you'll get there eventually. So
I want to thank both of you, Michelle and Rob and Sarah, for your time today. You are very well respected in this industry, and I appreciate your resourcefulness and your protection of assets, of doing it right. I think that makes everyone else look good, and that's an important part of leadership, certainly. Sarah, I'll let you take us out of here.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Michelle and Rob, I really appreciate your time today. I think that is a great conversation that was not only heard by folks today, but we'll be sharing it with all the folks who signed up. We had a very large list of signups because I know this was something everyone wanted to talk about. I just want to remind everybody too, when it comes to tourism and promoting our destinations, our communities are made up of all sorts of different people. And that's a big part of what we do in the travel and tourism world, is we really have to learn how to bring people together. In some years, it's really easy, and other years, it's not as easy. But at the end of the day, the goal is to really help our communities become economically stable, to help local businesses grow and also build their own sort of financial stability, and to give people a great experience when they come visit us so we can share what makes our communities special. And I think as we always go back to that root, that becomes a way to deal with all the different changes that are happening in the world. So I really appreciate your time. To everyone who's been here today, thank you so much. I hope to see you at our next digital drop-in in July. But in the meantime, enjoy your summer. And as we say here, you do amazing things. More people should know. Have a great rest of your day. And thanks again for your time. Kristen,
Pleasure.
Rob.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.